Okay, first step of any drawing is to tape your page down. So lining up my T-square with the edge of my page, taping down my corners. Once asked how much tape do I go through, like in a typical class or a typical semester, and I was like, I don't know. One day I'll have to make like a big old tape ball and see, because I do go through a lot of it. Got my corners taped down. Now I'm going to add in my title block, which those are centimeters, Miss Miller. And I'm going to measure a 1/4 inch on each side, 1/2 inch up there for my title block, and 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch. Always making sure my T-square is flush against the board. And always using my triangle flat against my T-square that is flush against the board. Always, always, always. And then I'll take some measurements at 4, 7, 9, 10.5 to just divvy out the parts of my title block. Okay. Now that I've got my title block ready to go, I'm going to start making my block. Just like with those other ones, we're going to just start by laying out our overall dimensions of our front face. And like with the one about 2 videos ago, I'm going to do some of that guide work a little bit more tighter so that this way I have less stuff to have to erase. So I've got an overall length of my front view is 6. I've got an overall height of 2, and then I'm just going to kind of keep in mind some of these measurements. You don't have to do it all in one take. You can go back and forth with your ruler, but I just find it easier to do it all at once. So I'm going to kind of note that this goes in 1, down 1, over 1. So I can just kind of have some of those measurements happening as I go. So I'm just going to pick a place in the bottom left corner, not right on my title block, and I'll just draw a guide over and a smaller guide up. And then on those lines, I'll just kind of measure that the whole thing should be 6, and that there's a feature happening 1 inch over and 1 inch over from that. So I'm just kind of noting down where those would be, so that way I have to take less measurements. And then I've got an overall height of 2, and then there's a feature 1 inch down from the top. So I'll draw just a guideline across, and I'm just kind of bringing it to about where that 6-inch measurement was. And since this 1 inch measurement is referring to that gap there, I'm just going to put the guide in between where those 1 inch measurements were. And then for my verticals, so I'm just lining it up where I made my little marks and then drawing the line in, rather than having to go and draw lots of guides and erase a lot of the work. Gives me just a little less to have to erase. Now I erase that wedge back there because that goes all the way through. So otherwise, it would be something similar to the notched block that we did previously. So with this one, we left that edge there because this block stops on the back. If I didn't leave that there, then it would be something like this end lap one where it just goes all the way through, but it has that back face, so that's why we stop it. In this case, since it does just go all the way through, I do want to erase that little edge right there. And so now I've got my top view, or my front view, excuse me, and I'm going to start on my top. So I'll just pick a place to start it, draw kind of a guideline across, and with my triangle, project some guides up. So I'm just lining up where those edges would be, doing my guide. Lining up where the edges would be, doing my guide. And not necessarily bringing it all the way from that edge because, like I had mentioned, this is just going to be guide work I'm going to have to erase anyway. So if I can make that correlation in my head, I can save myself some eraser work. So now I've got to lay out my top view. I've got all of those length measurements just from my front view. So I need to figure out what is my depth measurements for my top. So from the very front to the very back is 3 inches. And so I'm just going to measure 3 inches, make a mark, draw a line across, and then just kind of clean up some of the guide edges. I could be using my eraser shield to do this as well to get really nice clean corners and edges, but I don't need to for the sake of these demos. So now for the top view, I have all of those features. I have that there's this face, this one, and there's nothing else going depth-wise since this goes all the way through. If it had like a little place where it stopped, then as we did with this one, we had that little line there to designate where it stops, but it does go just all the way through. So we can leave it as that. Now for my miter line. So from my front view, where the top and right lines meet, which in this case is on my object, right there, I'm going to do 45 degrees up. And then where these hit, I'll project down. So I'm just going to line up my T-square and just make a little mark of where that crosses. Line up my T-square, make a little mark of where that cross, and then use my triangle to project those down. So I'll line up where it would meet, line down, line up where it would meet, which I'm stuck on my tape, guideline down. And then just projecting some guides from my front. And to save myself some eraser work, I'm only just doing them in between where those projected lines come from. And I've got nice even spacing and aligned views. That's what I love about the miter line. Now, with all of this guide work in my side view, let me try to thank you. Couldn't get my pencil up. I have that line there going down the middle to signify that little groove, just like with that previous groove block. But when I'm looking at the side of the object, we can't see that groove. So I can't see that edge like I could when I'm looking at this one. I can't see that edge there. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist, it just means it's not visible in this particular view. And if we have features that are there but just not visible in a view, we draw them in as a hidden line. So again, I'm just going to take my little thing, and maybe I can zoom this in a bit as I do it. Let's try to jerry-rig this to zoom and not fall. I know the glare is still a little annoying, but so what I'm doing is just lining this up, and I line up first. It doesn't come on the screen very well, but I line up that first circle right with that edge, and then I move it over one. So that way I know that there's going to be a line right on the edge. And then as I hold it in place, I just go in and erase, erase, erase. So now that I know that there's this little mark there on that edge where it needs to be, and then to continue the line over, I just kind of line up the gaps on top of some of those already existing ones. So that way I know that the spacing will stay even and consistent. And I'll erase it as I go. And now I have that hidden line to signify that there's an edge there. It's just not visible from this particular view. So you have to go somewhere else, some other view, to kind of see it and note it. And then for my title block, this one is called the Dado Block. And then you're going to put your name. Please make sure you've been actually writing your name and not just the words your name. Like, put your actual name in there. Please, please, please. The date that you drew this. The scale, which in this case is the ratio 1:1, so 1 inch on paper is 1 inch in real life. We drew this full size on the sheet. And how many drawings are included in this set of drawings. So in this case, this is drawing 1 of 1 associated with this drawing set. And there is the Dado block.